yours.
I apologize for the delay. However, that kind of fits into what my conversation is going to be today. All of us, if we look at the challenges that are happening in our world today, the mental challenges, I can say that a lot of them can be combated by me. M-my-E, emotion. If it were that simple, how wonderful it would be. However, it really is that simple. I don't need to go through all the ins and outs, literally, of what's been going on since 2020. However, let me just emphasize a few things that have made our mental health as bad as it is today. When you get an entire population of people worldwide who are isolated and their main forte is to be sociable, that's the start. The second is when they don't really have any control over being social, that's the next thing. And by the way, I asked to be spending more time with my family. And guess what? We got more time with your family. Now what? And the other is, what's the future? What's the future going to be? I have no clue. We've never been here before. So you can see these steps are building. They are building into what we're calling as the mental health issues that we have. And the last, which was so obvious to me, I'm part of the Queen Creek Chamber of Commerce here in Arizona. And what we talked about with the education committee was that parents hear their children who were in, home all this time say to their parents, Mom, Dad, what am I supposed to do for a career? And the parents are like, no clue, because we don't know what's happening. And then when we did get information about what's happening, guess what? They were contradictory. So trust was in that whole formula. Well, I'm not going to spend my entire talk on the doom and the gloom because you all know that answer. That's obvious. However, I have found that there are ways for us to change that, to really change that. You see, what we had was the people who were the survivors, and we're going to make it through and thrive. Or we had the people who were the complacent ones. Those were the two places that we had people residing in. The complacent ones, although complacency sounds like an easy word, that means you do nothing. You don't go forward. You don't go backwards. You're on hold. Well, if you have a population that's on hold, hopefully those that are going to survive and thrive are going to help them, going to assist them. And then I began to look at the word complacency. It's not just on hold. I began to look at the word complacency associated with love. I know, it's weird, huh? The opposite in my world of love is hate. No, it's not hate. The opposite of love is complacency. Complacency is accepting things just as they are without being grateful for what you have. There's no gratitude in complacency, it's accepting. And I love the quote, gifts from God are extended based on my acknowledgement of them. Gifts from God are extended based on my acknowledgement of them. So we can't play in the complacency very long before the mental health issues begin to grow. So we know there are one of two camps. Okay, that's fine. Now what do I do? Well, what I do now at this point is I realize that there are two words that are messing us up because we use them interchangeably instead of focusing on one instead of the other. And those two words are empathy and sympathy. Sympathy. Simple words, we use them all the time. Sympathy, empathy. Okay, we use them all the time. What really is the difference between sympathy and empathy? Well, I did a little study on all of this, and sympathy is when you're giving pity. You're making judgment. You're bringing in your own life and giving advice. You're feeling sorry for someone. Oh, okay, there are times when you need to do that. Like if someone has lost someone near and dear to them, and you don't really know them very well, you give them sympathy. Oh, I'm sorry to hear about what's happened. Oh, it's really awful. And you mean it sincerely, you mean it. And there are ways around saying the sympathy card, and I'll give you an example because I will use it the rest of my life. Recently, when my grandson passed away at age 19, during the celebration of his life, the pastor said, "It's often hard not to give sympathy." He said, "I want you to remember the 3 H's. The first H is hush. The second H is to hear. Hear what they have to say. And the third H is to hug." And those 3 pretty much cover helping them in their grief. However, his last comment resounded with me even more. And that comment was, "With all of the unanswered questions, may you still find peace." With all your unanswered questions, may you still find peace. So that really is part of the difference between sympathy and empathy. So how is empathy different? Define it yourself. However, I would define it as listening. Listening, no judgment, absolutely no judgment at all, not giving advice, intentionally listening, intentionally listening. That's really important. So I looked at what was called the mental healthy first aid, and I don't know if I can do this, share the screen. It sure would be nice if I had a chance to do that. And if I get really, really lucky, and I think I will, I have these up on the screen, so it's going to be easier for you to see. Can you see this? Colleen, raise your hand.
You're sharing your screen, but we only see the Zoom screen. So I'm not sure if you're sharing the right
Okay.
screen. You need to share your main screen, Jackie, and then we should be able to see whatever you move around to. Just click and share the main screen and
Got
then
it?
be able to,
Is that it?
yes, we can
Okay.
see these slides.
So what you're seeing is the 2 definitions, sympathy and empathy. And when I looked at a source called Mental Health First Aid, I think personally, I would take a screenshot of this if you could. It's a little key at the top of the keyboard, because this is very, very critical as far as I'm concerned. These are the behaviors that create empathy, and they all start with listening. Listening without judgment, that's the key here. Listening with intention, that means completely there. Eye contact, no fidgeting, no texting, complete intention. And then without advice, you're not telling them what to do. And this is what happens in so many cases of suicide and everything else. Oh, this is what you have to do. No, it has to come from them. Don't take away their privilege of figuring it out themselves. Listen with understanding. So you may say what I call an active listening. You said this, 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 and this. Don't throw any whistles and chimes. Active listen to them with understanding. And the last of what happens when you do that, not only do you have a better connection with them, but you get what I call your vulnerability and your intimacy. Into me, see. If we had used this whole example of empathy in the way we respond to people, think of how different it would be. Think of how different life would be instead of pouring advice, instead of giving pity. Think of how different it would be. So I began to look at my life and I said, am I using empathy? Well, I know the best example of this. And that example is with my mentor, Patricia J. Munson, in about 1986, she started a group called Women in Discovery. And on weekends, she would take up to thousands of women and be able to get them through a formula to build their lives. She changed thousands of lives. And as I look at what she gave me, I realized that even though all of what she said was based on integrity, it also was a way to deliver empathy. So I would like you to also consider using your screenshot to be able to look at these as well. Because my task here is to be able to help you build empathy into what you're doing every day. The first one is a little hard to stomach. What it is you are 100% responsible for you. I found that affrontive. That car ran into me and it wasn't my fault. Well, how you responded was your fault. You are able. You are able to respond to that situation. The second is to go to solution. So many times there are people that are blamed for this, that, and the other, and maybe one of them's you, but as quickly as possible, go to solution. It solves a lot of things, wastes a lot of time, saves a lot of time. Ask permission before changing everything. I can't tell you how many times I did this with Patricia. We'd go to lunch. We're scheduled to go to lunch. The last minute, somebody calls and says, you know, I've seen you for a long time. Why don't we go to lunch? I said, hey, I'm going with Patricia this afternoon. Why don't you join us? The three of us show up. Patricia's looking at me like, we said you and I were going to sit for lunch. Although I love so-and-so, you never asked my permission. So although you assume it's okay, which is the next one, ask permission, make no assumptions. It makes a ASS out of, you know how that goes. Make no assumptions. The next one is what others think of me is none of my business. So many times we are well, what are they going to think about me? Well, that's not fair. They're thinking, it's none of my business what you're thinking. Really, what you think about me is none of my business. Of course, I'd like it to be positive. Of course, I'd like to affect your life in a positive way. Of course, all of those things, but it's really none of my business. Presume positive intent. So when people are doing things with you or what you appear to be at you, most people don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to mess somebody's life up. Presume positive intent. What was it behind that that was really throwing that at me? Did they really mean it in a positive way? Strategy. And I love this strategy and I do it all the time. Something happens in my world. There's a challenge. And with that challenge, I have to make a decision. So the first thing I do is it my responsibility to change that? Can I change it? How? And if you can, do it. But if not, watch. And I love the expression, I wonder what God's going to do with this next. And the last one, and I'm going to throw in one more because so many of us are working so desperately to do what people want us to do by saying yes to everything instead of saying no. I forgot to put that in. No is a complete sentence. And if you say it, no, this doesn't work for me, it feels so much better. Or no, this doesn't work for me now. Both of those are a lot easier way of saying no, because you were the one, your reality is all that counts, really. And the last one is something that I pattern my entire life with all the time. And I use it in business all the time. And it's the 4 R's. The 4 R's. Let's give an example of the 4 R's. You are working in a corporation or some company, and you are responsible in your department for the coffee. So you go to a staff meeting, and the speaker says, or your boss says, somebody left the coffee on and it's crispy crittered. We're going to have to get a new pot. You leave the meeting and you get back to your desk and you go, yeah, I resent that. I didn't do it. So you begin to resent. Next thing happens. Oh, could you possibly stay overtime and over this weekend? Not in your life. I'm going to resist that. Then the next thing that happens is, I'm going to work on revenge. This is ridiculous. And by that time, your boss is already at resentment, resistance, and about ready to get into revenge. This is how nations explode. This is how relationships explode. This is how marriages explode. And they need not happen because there is a way to stop it. As soon as there was the first resentment, you stop what you're doing. You go back to the individual and you report with love. You know, I felt like you were trying to tell the world that I did it, or I had feelings of not being adequate. So it's I messages. It's I messages. So as I looked, excuse me, as I looked at this and I thought, well, okay, Patricia has helped me a lot through all of this. And I began to say, well, have I really done this all my life? And what I came up with, yes, I have done this all my life. And how this really shaped me. When I was 6, my father died, and my mother, widowed mother, did not pass judgment on things that were happening. She listened to me. She gave me choices and chances to make my own mistakes. When I joined the Peace Corps in Liberia and West Africa, I had to have empathy. I had to. I had no choice. I wasn't going to give them advice. I wasn't going to tell them how to live. I wasn't going to tell them that you need a refrigerator. Now they want a refrigerator and they can't have one. Empathy was I was listening and understanding. And then I began networking groups after I started my first business in the Bay Area in California based on expertise and needs. And guess what? I had to listen. I wasn't there to give advice. I had to find out their expertise and needs so I could give them choices so that they could actually put that on their path, whoever on their path. And now globally, I do that in countries, about 20 countries all over the world, is to sit and be empathetic about what their needs are. Do you need literacy? Do you need health? Do you need something other than that? Do you need women's rights to be respected? All of it is based on literacy, by the way. And I have to use empathy as I do that. And this all is pretty much summed up in what I learned from a person who is what I call an indigo. She's here for the second time. And she said to me, "You are here to change humanity." I said, "What? Are you kidding me?" I cried all the way home and I established my mantra. My age justifies my wisdom. My developed clarity teaches the excitement of awareness and ignites the spark of action and change. And so this is what I have done on my path. I would like to offer you as well free resources, complimentary resources, one of which would be to have a clarity session with me on Zoom, complimentary. And if you want the PowerPoint that I'm showing you today, go ahead in the chat and say that you would like that. Also, I'm offering a focused excitement of awareness wellness group. And there's the link. Take a screenshot and be able to use it later. It's September 12th, 2nd and 4th Tuesdays. The third is a workshop that I'm doing, leveraging alliances in LinkedIn. And that's the 29th of September. Would love to have you bring an alliance and we will show you a strategy on how to leverage them in LinkedIn. That's my business. And complimentary on my website is a virtual event engagement tips. And so that's what this is all about today. And I would like to leave with the thought of what I think is really important. And it's a comment that was made and is at all my emails from Jimi Hendrix. When the love of power is replaced with the power of love, the world will know peace. Thank you.
Wow.
Anybody there?
Yes.
Anybody there?
There was a moment of silence because we're so captivated by everything you just said.